Welcome to the Actual Fluency podcast. Each week you'll find inspirational, motivational interviews with some of the world's best language learners, industry experts, all trying to help you to learn foreign languages better, faster, and more efficiently. And here we go. This episode is brought to you by the italki Goals competition, where you can win up to $500 of italki credits and $500 towards a flight ticket of your choice. All you have to do is take a picture or record a video of you saying your language goals for 2019 and sharing them with italki on social media. For full details on how to enter the competition, go to actualfluency.com/goals. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 140 of the Actual Fluency podcast. We've got a great show lined up for you today about setting goals and tracking them as well, and also a little bit of a debate on New Year's resolutions. Are they actually useful, or should you avoid them at all? Before we get into the episode with Kerstin Cable today, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a couple of you who wrote to me lately. I really appreciate getting emails and letters sometimes I've also received, and instant messages. So I just want to thank Ronald, Alan Felipe, and Christina Svensson for writing to me this week. I really appreciate all the messages I get. So today's guest, Kerstin Cable, is a long-time friend of the show and myself, and she's running her own podcast, actually, the Fluent Show, so you might have heard some episodes over there. I've been on the show a couple of times as well, and she and her co-hosts make a really interesting and fun environment over there for anyone who wants to learn languages. As Kerstin often says in the episode today, it's like whatever makes you happy, and listening to the Fluent Show is definitely a happy activity. So I highly recommend checking out the Fluent Show. She also has the blog fluentlanguage.co.uk, where she talks about some of her own experiences learning languages, and she provides a variety of products and resources for you to get better at other languages like French, German. So definitely check that out. She's also organizing a conference called Women in Languages, which is an online-only conference. We'll talk about it a little bit in the episode as well. And that's a very convenient conference to go to because you can do it from your home. It's a purely digital one. So stay tuned for that. And as always, all the links and descriptions, everything will be in the podcast description and on actualfluency.com, so you can easily find the links you want. As I mentioned, this episode is a lot about goals and goal setting, so I hope you're ready to think about what you want to achieve in 2019. It's a long time, but if you don't manage the goals or your productivity well, you might soon find yourself in 2020 before you realize it. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and let me know if you have any questions or comments. You can email me, chris@actualfluency.com. I always read every email. I might not respond to everyone, but I certainly try. So I really appreciate it. Have a great episode, and have a great January. Kerstin, it's a wonderful pleasure to have you back. It's apparently been thousands of years since you were on the podcast, so there's a lot to talk about. But why don't you start by giving the listeners who might not be familiar with you who you are, where you're from, and what you're working on.
Hello, Chris. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on Actual Fluency. I'm very excited to be back. It really has been a while. My name is Kerstin Cable. I am from fluentlanguage.co.uk, and like you, I'm a fellow language podcast host. I've been doing this for a few years now, and my podcast is called The Fluent Show, and it's a show about, as I say every week, loving, living, and learning languages. I'm German native speaker. I speak English, French. Are we doing the list? It seems I'm doing the list. I speak English, French, and Welsh quite well. I speak Spanish and Italian quite okay. And I've sort of dabbled in Russian, and I've done Latin in the past, and at the moment I'm dabbling in Chinese, so I've got a thing for languages for sure.
Very nice. And you have actually been on the podcast. I think you're up there with the most actual appearances, so listeners of the show will definitely have heard your voice before. I'm sure there's lots of Fluent Show listeners as well on as it's a good crossover on the listeners there. So what we're gonna do today is a New Year's show, a New Year's version. We should almost have like funny hats and champagne and stuff. But since it's a Monday when we're recording this, I guess it's better just to keep it like this. But what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the New Year's resolutions, of course, but also maybe a little bit more broad goal setting, because a lot of people have no idea how to do it in languages. A lot of people just kind of randomly, haphazardly study, and they don't seem to get very far. And then there are people like me who have like, let's call them rough ideas and goals of where I want to be and go, but not really good enough to commit. And then you have Kerstin, of course, who I brought on as an expert of goal setting today. And I was hoping we could do a little bit of a discussion on that today. So first of all, I guess the obvious leading question is, why should we set goals in language learning? Why can't we just, open a book whenever we feel like it?
That's a good question. When I first started this whole teaching myself a language, and I had to get organized, I did what a lot of people do, which is I might put in my diary, learn French. Or like learn Polish or something, learn Russian, and what I found really quickly is if you put something like that down, if your goal is just to learn the language or to get fluent, you very quickly get lost in the day-to-day, because both of those goals are they're not really, they're not goals in the sense that we are taught, let's say in corporate environments, that goals need to be smart, right? And that is sensible. So those goals aren't trackable. You essentially just sit down, you go, right, learn Russian. What am I doing? And you then have to spend a lot of time worrying about what you're actually doing. So goal setting is helpful for many different reasons. Number one, because it gives us an opportunity to break down the very large, very long language learning journey into milestones, so we can actually see what's on the horizon and move towards it. So it gives you something to aim for that is tangible, that you can actually reach. Number two, because it reminds us why we're doing this, and it gives us a chance to focus on what we're doing. And there's two types of goals. I can talk about them later that I work with. And I think number three, because it gives us a chance to review and at different stops in the road, so to say, look back and remind ourselves how far we've come, because it's very easy to lose that. So it's one of the best ways I have found to break down this language learning journey and make it a little bit more manageable, so you don't give up.
Right, because learning a language is a ridiculously long and difficult task for even the best of us, really. Like even language experts and top polyglots who've learned 10, 20, 30 languages, for them it's still a journey. It gets easier because you get all the cognates, and you figure out your method, you figure out how to actually learn what parts of the language you should focus on. But for most people, let's say you sit down, you learn a completely foreign language like Japanese, if you're an English speaker, that is a big task. And if you just, like Kerstin said, learn Japanese, I mean, first of all, what does that even mean? That's like that sounds like an end goal, an impossible end goal, no less, because how could you ever learn a language fully? Like I don't know everything of Danish or English for that matter. So how could I ever expect to do that with a foreign language? And the other part, like you just touched on the end there, which is the only way to fail learning a language is to stop learning it. But you will do that if it's just too much. You can't kind of get a good overview of where you're actually progressing. And if you can't see progress, that's when you start to feel like, oh God, I'm burning out. I don't want to do this anymore. Like I've been doing this for years. I don't feel any progress. So that's where trackable goals really come in. And I don't know what kind of goals you use. Do you want to give any examples of like let's say weekly or monthly or daily study goals, like an example of how that could look like?
Yes, I've done a bit of work on the goal setting method that I find works for me and to helps other people set up a routine. So I've and I if anybody's interested, I have put it in a little. It's not a course so much as a toolkit, and it's called a toolkit. So I've got this thing called the Language Habit Toolkit because I so much focus in everything I do around language learning methods. I focus on habit building. I focus on long-term commitments, and I have to say, it certainly works for me, and I know it's worked for other people as well. So I am learning from experience, and I've been learning like the Welsh language for 3 years. And last week went for a coffee with a lady, half an hour, and had a full-on conversation. So it
Fantastic.
does work. But it works because it's other people's and research and science is good ideas that I've crystallized. So I haven't come up with this myself because that'd be stupid. So anyway, the idea is that, or what I work with is I've got what I call a vision goal, which is your long-term. It's much more of a question of how do you want to feel? What kind of situations do you envisage when you've reached a goal that you really want to reach? So what's going to make you feel super excited about what you're doing? Who are you going to talk to? How, like, are you going to impress a female or are you going to, I've just had Shannon Kennedy on the show. I think that show was number 118, I think, if I'm not wrong. So, and we reviewed last year. So we sort of looked at last year, and she said she started learning Hungarian because she started working for Drops and she wanted to surprise her bosses. And she was imagining what that conversation would be like. She was imagining them being excited. And we talked about how that's such a cool vision goal because you can really feel the excitement when you think about it. And it's a tangible situation. She does really well at those. Here's the situation I envisaged. And I think that's great because it's better. It's more tangible. It's more vivid than just thinking, okay, and then I'm going to be fluent, in Russian.
Yeah.
So even along the way, and I have one of those, I've got a vision goal or even two. And then you got to get the work done though, right? It's no way around it. Language learning is a bit of work. So I also work with what I call path goals, or sort of process goals. So those are much more about what I do. And I've got mine up behind my desk, so I can pretty much read them out to you what my January goals are.
Fantastic.
So I do monthly ones. I'm still focused on the Welsh language, and I split mine into what I call the 4 core skills, which if you know me or I've been on the show about before, so I bang on about those endlessly, and it's another thing that's built into the toolkit. And I wrote Fluency Made Achievable about it. The first time I dabbled in writing a little book and just never stop. So core skills: listening, reading, speaking, writing. Mm-hmm. I try to cover all of them and have them roughly on the same level because I believe fluency in the sense of confidence and knowing like I can handle this challenge needs competence in all 4 core skills at roughly similar levels. So in listening, I'm focusing on listening a lot this month because I've found myself sort of when I listen to the radio, I found myself challenged in a way that I felt was a little bit below the level I'd like to be. So I'm going to listen twice in a week to the Say Something in Welsh listening exercises. So I'm getting really specific. I know exactly where to find them. And they're on my phone. It's convenient for me to do. And there's I found a Welsh slow news website. And they do audio recordings. So I want to listen to them once a week. And again, I set myself a goal of doing 10. So really specific, really measurable this month. If I don't do this 10 times this month, I'm not really that bothered. But even writing that I want to do it 10 times is probably going to make me do it more than I originally did.
Yeah. No, that's why you write it down, isn't it? Like, it's just to have that mental tracking of it, and it makes it more tangible than just thinking you want to do it, and you're kind of accountable to yourself as well.
Yeah.
or to the piece of paper, I suppose. Do you take them off as well? Do you have like a marker or some kind of system to once you've done it, you have a little 10-second victory dance?
I've got no, I don't tick off these specific goals, but I do clear the list, which is hosted by Lindsay Williams and Shannon Kennedy, and I know you used to do clear the list as well for a little while. We've talked about it on the Fluent Show actually. And clear the list is a blog roundup where you kind of look back on the last month and look forward and set your new goals. And I found that's a very helpful system for me to do it. And then I use one of the worksheets from the Language Habit Toolkit, which I keep mentioning because it's super useful.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description if people are interested in the Language Habit Toolkit.
Yeah, do it.
I think it's a good idea to put some effort into actually learning the method. I see it as a bit as sharpening the axe before chopping down the tree. So I would definitely recommend people to spend a little bit of time if you feel like your learning is a bit haphazard or like erratic, then it makes sense to just sit down, take a breath, and just see, okay, where do I want to be? So that's your vision goal, or I called them outcome goals before. Where do I want to be? Where do I see myself with this language or whatever you're setting goals for? This is the beauty of this topic as well, is you can literally use this for anything. If you want to lose weight, or maybe you want to learn how to play chess or the piano or swimming. It doesn't really matter at all, but where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? How does the end look like? What would you like to do with this topic or language that you're learning? So those are the vision or outcome goals, and then you have the broken down into the processes, which have to be super specific. Like the more specific, the better, because a lot of people I've seen, they set goals like learn French for 30 minutes. Yeah, well, that's great, but then you're going to spend 25 minutes figuring out what to do. I don't know if you ever had this experience, but I've definitely done that mistake before of writing, oh yeah, I want to do half an hour a day, which, sounds really simple and it's really easy to do, but you start the session thinking, well, what should I really do? And then you procrastinate, and then by the time you spend an hour, you've done nothing. You're like, oh, okay, I spent an hour on it, that's okay. And in that sense, you'll never really get anywhere. So it's
The
important.
other downside of doing that as well is that you tend to set the time aside and you follow your own scheduling there. But this isn't for everybody. For me, certainly, scheduling. First of all, I ignore almost every schedule I make for myself.
Right.
So I've given up on that one. I find it much, much, much more helpful to set the specific goals and have them in front of me, and then somehow magically I find the time. I use the time. But if I sit down beforehand and go, when am I going to use the time? It's not as effective. I don't know. That's a Kerstin thing or whatever. I'm sure there's people like me out there.
Yeah.
Chaotic, crazy people. And the other thing about setting your goals or breaking down your goals into something like listening, speaking, reading, writing, and focusing, anchoring them in a review, in really asking yourself, and that's a big part of the process for me, really asking yourself, well, what did I do last month? What do I want to do in the next month? And that saves you from yourself thinking about what you want to do in 6 months. It saves you from yourself a little bit, and it helps you know what's in front of you, because you've got to deal with what's in front of you in language learning. So breaking down your goals into listening, speaking, reading, writing means you automatically give yourself variety. You think about your resources in a more comprehensive way, which is better, because if you say, I want to do 30 minutes of French, maybe you're going to sit down and do 30 minutes of Assimil every day. And again, I am really speaking from my own experience here. I think that's so boring that it becomes demotivating, because you're always doing the same thing and you don't get the beauty of all that variety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's an important disclaimer, is that there's no formula really. There's no right or wrong way to be productive. Like some people thrive in chaos, so they will have no goals, they will have no overarching ideas of what to do, but they just get on with it. And for some people that works. For me, it doesn't work at all, because I start procrastinating. I start just delaying it. I start putting it off, and I start to get overwhelmed because if I look at, my virtual bookshelf and I have like 20 different Russian resources I can use, then I won't start learning because I'm confused and overwhelmed about which resource to use. But for other people, they just distinctly know, or instinctively know even. And, I don't do as specific goals as you do, Kerstin, but I still see the power of at least thinking about it, so you figure out what type of person you are, what type of learner or what type of goal setter you are. And you might find that being a little bit stricter on the goals will help you more, or some of you will definitely need to be a little bit looser on them, because there's no point in like going into Google Calendar and marking every day where you want to learn if you can never ever respect those markings. That just doesn't work. And I've tried that before as well with very limited success. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. Hope you're enjoying this discussion and episode about goals and goal setting. I just want to take a brief moment to just talk about some things that are happening over at italki, which is the show's main sponsor. italki is a tutoring platform where you can get lessons in pretty much every language, and usually you can find lessons very cheap, so it doesn't break the bank. It doesn't cost as much as evening classes, and you can do it over Skype from your home, in your underwear, whatever you prefer to do, and it's just a super convenient way to learn. And I think one-on-one tutoring is one of the most efficient ways to learn anyway, because the materials are so tailored to you. Your level is the only one the teacher needs to take care of, so you can definitely learn a lot in a very little time compared to traditional methods. Right now, there's two things going on in italki you need to know. So there's the goals competition, which I mentioned in the intro. So if you go to actualfluency.com/goals, you can see the competition there. Basically, you just have to share a photo or video with a hashtag, and you could win $500 worth of credits towards lessons, including a $500 flight ticket, or towards a flight ticket if you want to go far, where you can choose where to go, basically. So that's the grand prize. The other thing is the language challenge is returning on italki, so that starts February 1st. Basically, you commit to taking a number of lessons, and then you can win prizes by completing those number of lessons. I highly recommend this because you can choose how many you want to go for, and having this kind of extra reason to do a lot of lessons can really boost your learning. Just be sure not to go overboard. It's easy to burn out after doing a lot of lessons in a short period of time. So check that out. You can find the challenge at actualfluency.com/challenge and see all the rules and prizes there. So hope you enjoy those initiatives from italki. And if you want to get started with a lesson, you get $10 free credit after doing your first lesson. So that's for everyone. You don't need a special link for that. If you use actualfluency.com/italki, they will be very happy, and they can see that it's worth for them to be part of this show. So anyway, let's get back to the show with Kerstin Cable talking about goals and New Year's resolutions.
There's one thing only that I track, that because you asked if I check it off. One thing that I track on a daily basis, and that is something I call my contact goal. So it's just, have I had contact with my target language today? And contact can be anything. It can be me doing an app. It can be me switching the radio on for 10 minutes. It can be me switching the radio on for an hour. It can be me reading 8 pages in a book. It doesn't matter at all. It's just a question, have I made contact? And then at the end of the month, I know, about half the days this month, about 80% of the days this month, I actually did something and checked in that I did something in Welsh. And I use an app for contact goal, and the app is called Streaks, and it's fabulous.
I've seen that, yeah. And it's great to keep it's that low barrier of entry, isn't it? Where you set yourself the goal of, I just need to do something. And then once you open the book or the podcast or whatever, you get drawn into the material, and by the end of it, you might spend 30, 60 minutes actually doing the stuff, even though the original goal was simply just to open the book. Or, that's a good trick, I feel like, because what some people might be saying is, okay, I've got loads of free time. I want to learn French quickly, so I'll set aside 4 hours per day. And first of all, I think that's a ridiculous amount of time. Some people can obviously do it. For me, my scatterbrained self, I cannot. But the problem is putting the goal as 4 hours of French today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow is totally unrealistic. But what you can do, I've done this with great success, is put 10 minutes or 15 or whatever small amount that you would never even question doing. It's a bit like the old fitness trick of doing one push-up. You know, when you're down in the push-up position, you're like, okay, I might as well do a couple now that I'm here. And for me, that works with languages as well, especially with apps like Memrise or some of these. I'll be like, okay, I just need to do 5 flashcards. And when you're there, you're like, okay, I might as well do a little bit. And by the end, I've done maybe 50. So I think that's a good little hack to use if you find that your goals are too big and too overwhelming. Obviously, breaking them down into much smaller units will mean that you are more likely to do them, I think, and even overperform your goals sometimes.
And I must say that the habit focus that I tend to talk about, the method. No one likes to say they have a method, but the way I look at language learning and the way language learning is a part of my life, which is automatically how I speak about it and what works for me and what I have seen work for my customers, my followers, etc., the people who get in touch, the Fluent Show listeners. Certainly, I'm not here for I want to learn French quickly and then be done in 3 months, because personally that's not something I get a lot of. I just have nothing drives me towards that. So I'm really like I say, like I want to. Oh, I'm curious about Welsh. Oh, I want to learn a bit of Welsh. Oh, I want to learn. Oh, actually, now I've got a Welsh goal. Oh, yes, I'm working towards it. But I am always very aware that the rate at which I work is more. One of my listeners, Elizabeth, she calls it turtle power, and it's that really. It's like I know this time next year, I'm probably still going to be here. And I'm going to be better than I was this year. So you watch out for me next year this time. But I don't really care so much about whether I'm fluent in, 8 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, I think in general that's a bad idea as well. Because languages are like a lifetime thing. Once you learn a language, yeah, you can get a little rusty. You can forget a few words here and there. But once you get to a high enough level, it doesn't really go away. So for me, with Russian, my goal was always like, just don't quit. And then I know that one day I will reach my goal of being conversational or higher, depending on if I need to.
And isn't that the joy, Chris? Isn't that the beauty?
So. I think so. Because if I start doing, okay, you have to pass the B2 exam in 6 months. I'm like, yeah, that's never happening for me, never. Because it's just not what I'm about. But some people really like exams and can use them for a lot of motivation and find it like a purpose. But for me, I'm definitely all about turtle power as well. And I don't know if I actually succeed very well, but I'll get back to you on that. But my vision is that by taking the full picture, working on all 4 skills, you actually get a much more rounded language skill at the end, rather than just being able to. And this is not a criticism. This is, I think, if you can learn something like conversational Spanish in a month, where you can go to a Spanish-speaking country and actually use it daily and talk to people, but you maybe don't read or listen very well to like TV or a series. I think that's totally fine. It all depends on what your goals are. But for me, my vision is to have a very rounded and balanced language level where I can sort of do everything. I don't want to just be able to pull out a few touristy phrases or just do like basic conversation. I'd like to be able to also read some of the native materials, the articles, understand the radio, whatever. And I think that goes hand in hand with the turtle power, because you can't learn everything quickly. They're just not. Well, maybe some people can. It will take quite a lot of hours, and you'd need to be extremely dedicated. Like I think there's a few people in the world maybe that can do it that way, but for me, definitely not. And that's why also having the goals keep you online, because if you have a goal that's like 10 years long, let's say that's how long it takes to reach a really high level in a language from scratch using a turtle method, then you need goals to kind of keep you in line and keep you on track, because otherwise how are you ever going to know how much you've done or where you've come and not give up when you're frustrated about the lack of progress?
I agree. And so something that your listeners or an actual fluency listener could do if they're, and we're talking New Year's resolutions here, but this is before a New Year's resolution. Really, we're still talking about goal setting in the first place. So if you're thinking about goal setting, examine your goals. Think about how they make you feel, sort of inside. Like, do you get excited about them, or do they feel like a burden? And if they feel like a burden, then find something that sounds more exciting. And it could be, you're allowed stupid stuff, right? You're allowed stupid goals.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they're not stupid. As long as they make you happy. That's bringing a bit of Fluent Show magic here. It's like, as long as it makes you happy, you're doing the right thing. That's very much what I always say. And the other thing that you can do if you want to try this out is think of the next 30 days, think of what's right in front of you, and just set yourself one task in listening, speaking, reading, and writing that you think is doable in the month. And it could be something like have 5 italki lessons, or it could be like if you haven't done italki lessons yet, or tutoring lessons, or anything like that, or you just don't want to do that. Like I think in November, one of my goals was just to advertise locally for a Welsh speaker, because I thought there must be someone somewhere. And, I put an advert in one of those Facebook, what's that noise groups, those local residents of so-and-so, there's a traffic jam, blah, 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 one of those. And I got mocked by so many people going like, oh, everybody speaks gobbledygook, blah, blah. And then one person took pity on me and said, and replied in Welsh and said, hey, I speak Welsh. I'll come out for a coffee with you.
That's great.
And here we are. Now we've got a local exchange partner. And that was a goal. So you're allowed a goal that isn't even really language learning, that is just enables you to learn languages in the future. So you really want a long-term perspective. So set yourself that 30-day goal, or 40 or 80, whatever makes you happy, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and you'll feel the magic. It works.
Yeah, it's important to have both type of goals, I feel like, because you don't get daily motivation out of imagining how you will speak the language in 2 years' time or something. You really need to split it up a bit in the process, or the process goal, just to have that daily. And I think honestly, the smaller the goal, the easier it is to do, and you'll often overperform. So if your goal is to read a page of SML, for instance, I would be shocked if most people didn't pick up the book and read at least a chapter, because you're thinking, okay, I've got the book in front of me, I'm sitting down here now. It took me 5 minutes to read the page. I might as well read a couple more. And even if you don't, the best part is if you just do a page, you won't feel guilty, because that was what you set out to do. So to me, it's a very beautiful and fail-safe system to kind of set these very, very achievable process goals daily or weekly or whatever you prefer.
But got to know yourself. Are you a overshooter or a over-aimer?
That's it, yeah. That's it, exactly. And the only way you can know that is just to try it out and see what works for you. Like you say, what makes you happy. And if you feel like tracking all these goals and all these things that we talk about is making you miserable, then obviously it's not for you and you shouldn't do it. And I, like I said in the beginning, don't do a lot of this just because I have a hard time actually keeping up with all the things I need to do goal-wise. So I don't do the daily goals anymore. I probably should, but I don't at the moment. But what
is not a helpful word.
yeah. Well, I think it would help me. That's my view. But at this point, it's New Year, so I think I'll need some time. Do you get that feeling as well? You've had a long holiday, like where you're a bit off the clock, and then you come back and you're like, oh, I need a holiday from the holiday, because it's just a lot of social life packed into so few days. Like I was visiting friends and family every day of December from the 22nd until the 31st, pretty much non-stop. So for me, getting back in January, it's like, okay, I just need a few days to relax. But
you've got the expat suffering now.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I am back home, and here's my list.
Oh, yeah, that's the problem, yeah. But what I wanted to actually also just briefly touch on is New Year's resolutions. So we're about a week in to the new year. So most people would have probably set some kind of resolution, even if they didn't call them resolutions. I think a lot of people take New Year's as a chance to reflect, what do I want to do in the next year? So even if you didn't specifically write it down as some kind of resolution, maybe you still have a goal or an idea or a plan to learn a language in 2019. I think that's a fantastic way to start the year. What do you think about New Year's resolutions?
New Year's resolutions to me are about habit change. And so in that sense, it's tricky. I don't tend to set them because I don't necessarily just feel because a date in the diary happens to come up that I'm ready to like do this thing. I've definitely set myself a health resolution, but that's because I had an incredibly busy December, hosted a language retreat, ate too many Plätzchen, German delicious Christmas biscuits, and then was like, okay, this is like you gotta get back in the groove of not being at home drinking G&T at 4 p.m. So that was a fun week, but it's a week and we're done with that. So that just happened to come up, like the life circumstances in that sense. But that is I guess a type of resolution. I find it, tend to think around this time of year, I tend to do a review, and that is a big part of what I do. So my resolutions or my wishes for the future and my vision, I guess, for this year are more anchored in what happened last year and what worked and what didn't work. So my resolution tends to be continue to do what works and consider why what didn't work and how I can, what the opportunity is that I can find. So yeah, but for language learning, it's difficult for me to talk about that because I feel I have a very established routine that mostly works. Right.
Well, I would like to say something that probably a little bit might surprise you. I think New Year's resolutions are terrible mostly. I think it's mostly a waste of time for most people, honestly. I think it's great, like you do, to review what you're working on and, having taken the opportunity that the year changes gives you. So sort of a perspective on what's working and what's not. But you could do that on the 26th of December. You could do that on the 4th of January. You can do that 1st of February. To me, New Year's resolutions is an excuse to make it sound like you have these big ideas and plans, or like you want to achieve a lot of things, but then it just fizzles out. Like, what's the percentage of New Year's resolutions? It must be tiny that actually gets done. So I think maybe it's a little bit provocative and maybe a little bit overly so. But I just don't think it's a particularly good idea, because any day is a good day to start learning a language. And if you want to do it, I really don't. Let's say you're listening to this in like October. Like, why would you wait until January to start learning French or Italian or whatever you want to learn? And likewise, if it's like January 10th, you don't have to cry about you missing your whole New Year's resolutions. So I think if you use the goals, suggestions and ideas that we talked about before, you have a much better system than some arbitrary date, like you said as well, some random date in the calendar. Because if you want to learn a language and you've never done it before, you're really creating a new habit. And I don't think just because it's New Year that's going to be a particularly possible or easy task. It's much better just to use the time and the strategies that we've talked about just a moment ago, and just start now. When you listen to this, start now. Like, why worry about New Year's resolutions? And they're kind of doomed to fail as well, because they're so grand. They're so grandiose. Like, it's like you say a New Year's resolution might be learn French in 2018. Well, first of all, we talked about this earlier. What does it mean to learn French? That's different for everybody. Like, if you mean learn as in the perfective, completely learn French, then I'm sorry to say that's probably not going to be doable in a year. But if you want to learn, you need to first of all set down, like we said, make it concrete, make it tangible. What does it mean for you to learn French? Imagine yourself in December next year if you want to do a yearly goal. I think that's a good timeline. A year is a good timeline. Imagine how good you'll be speaking and understanding and writing and listening to French in December of 2019, if that's what you want to do, and then work your way back from there. That's what I would do. But just as a general comment, I just think New Year's resolutions are silly. Honestly, I think it's more of a gimmick than anything else. Obviously, it works for some people, but I think the people that it works for don't need to set New Year's resolutions because they already have some kind of goals system in place or some kind of review system. And it may happen around New Year, but they definitely don't do it like the classic New Year's resolutions, like lose 50 kilos, stop smoking, whatever, eat healthy. I don't know what people generally do, but I don't know what you think about that. But I just wanted to take the time to rant a little bit on New Year's resolutions.
Right. Well, that's hard to follow up.
Well, you can say, Chris, you're an idiot. Of course, New Year's resolutions are fantastic, and I have had great success with them, or something.
I think there is something to be said for that positive, optimistic goal-setting energy.
Yeah.
That we have, that many people have around the time of New Year. Whenever it comes, right? Never mind. When it comes, we'll take it. We'll work with it. This is good. So the people, I think, looking into the future with optimism, thinking about what it is that you're hoping to achieve is great. I think a year is difficult, right? Because I think we underestimate how short a year is, and we overestimate how short a week is.
Mm-hmm.
Right, there's a Gretchen Rubin who I look to as a excellent person talking about habit change, and I really like her books. She says the years are long, but the days are long, but the years are short, and that's one thing to remember. And I think there is that. So learn French is a wonderful intention, but you got to be aware that it's an intention. And to me, a New Year's resolution is more about concrete things that you're actually going to do, and like I said before, about habit change. So something I want to do this year that I didn't set the goal any other time because I didn't have the chance to reflect on it, or it didn't occur to me to reflect on it, because we need downtime to reflect. We need time away. And I think that's the other thing. It just so happens that the holidays are before New Year's, and that's when people have the chance to reflect, and that's a natural break in many people's Western schedules.
Definitely.
So that's we've got this energy because we've all just had a rest and a lot of food, and it's brilliant. So
yeah.
So what you can think about, or something I'm thinking about, is stuff like, I want to send more thank you cards next year, or say thank you to people more.
Yeah.
And I use these. I won't. At the end of the year, I will know, have I done this? Haven't I done this? But it's not the same as I want to learn French, for example.
Right.
Because it's an intention that I set. So then it becomes about, how does that big intention that you set, like Chris said, maybe even grandiose, maybe nothing wrong with that. How does that become a small part of your everyday life? So something I can do right now is buy a stack of postcards that say thank you on them, so that they're there when I want to send one.
Definitely.
Right? And then I can just look, and if that stack is still there at the end of December, then, well, I suck, right? So
yeah.
But I can still use it going forward. So I think it's about, how do you make this wonderful energy that we have now, which I do think is a positive thing, into something smaller that you can actually work with on a day-to-day.
Definitely. I think my problem is more how people do New Year's resolutions compared to the actual resolutions themselves. Because I think if you, like, to take your example, I want to thank people more. I think that's a philosophy change. That's like, you want to improve on an existing philosophy. You want to do something more or better. But by the end of the year, you don't really care if you sent 50 or 100 or 500. It doesn't matter the amount. It's just a sort of a philosophy, an intent, like you say. Whereas doing something like learning French is a very specific goal. Like it's very well. Sorry, it's not a specific goal to say I want to learn French, but it's a very specific task. It's a very learning a language is a very concrete thing, whereas saying something like I want to be healthier is a very not concrete thing. And if you actually do want to lose weight, having a New Year's resolution called I want to be healthier is terrible. But if you just want to be healthier and make better choices, have a better health philosophy, then using a New Year's resolution like I want to be healthier, I think it's actually fine. And I don't want to beat down New Year's resolutions at all. I just think most people, and I could be wrong about this, maybe people already know this, I think most people will do sort of this big statement and then they don't do the process goals, or they don't break it down. So it's impossible for them to sustain the habit. It's a bit like saying, I want to be healthy next year. Well, that's fine, but what does that mean? So you need to break it down. I want to lose 50 pounds, whatever your goal may be. 50 pounds, let's say 52 pounds. It's a pound a week. Okay, I'll need a caloric deficit of this and this, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly you've gone from this very, I would almost say, shallow overarching New Year's resolution of be healthier. You've gone into a much more relatable and achievable goal, let's say a pound a week. And with languages you could do, okay, I want to have a 2,000 word vocabulary in French by the end of the year. 2,000 words divided by 52 weeks. What's that, something like 40 a week or something? If I'm not too mistaken, a little bit less than 40 a week. And then suddenly it becomes manageable. I mean, 40 words a week is a lot, like I would say. But it's doable, I think, if you do some kind of goal listing or flashcards or something.
I think the problem is perhaps, or there's two that I see. And the biggest one perhaps is the mystery that surrounds language learning. Mm-hmm. So you say, like you set yourself the goal, learn French, because it's hard at the start if you're not like us, sort of, talking about it. Nerds. Like I really know how to teach myself a language because I've done it and I've guided other people through it and so on and so forth. So I feel fairly confident in this. I know where I'm starting, what I'm doing, and even I don't, I'm playing around with Chinese at the moment. Even I wouldn't know what to do if I launched myself into it immediately. So something useful, and I promise, Language Habit Toolkit, I know I'm talking about it again, but it's because that's where I collect a lot of useful stuff. Something I put in there is a resource organizer. It's a worksheet, and there's a big thing in there about organizing your resources, or just thinking about what types of resources you have and you need, because I think it's very easy at the start to get yourself one thing and rely on that one too much, or to only get resources that don't guide you through the process, so that you literally only have YouTube videos or something like that, and you go, well, I'm going to learn by immersion, but you're lacking structure, and then you get lost. So what I talk about in terms of resources is essentially that you want a guiding resource, one or two, takes you through the process. Could be even something like an app with a curriculum, but I tend to go for a book or some kind of textbook, or at least an online course or something. Just something where the next lesson builds on this one. And then you want input resources, which is the more fun stuff where you really have engagement with your target language, the stuff that you want to engage with. And then there are your reference resources. So just make sure you know where the dictionary is, or do you have a dictionary? And perhaps you might want a grammar explanation. You just, like when those questions come up, you want to know where to look. And once you've got those various resources, then you're a little bit better set up. But there's a lot to be said for, like you said earlier, learning how to learn.
Right.
So if you set yourself the goal of learn French, and you haven't done any of this stuff that we ceaselessly bang on about because we are podcasters about this, you are somewhat lacking that. So in a way, that's a problem with the New Year's intention, I'll call it, of learning French, is that it's too easy to kind of get lost in you have to think about yourself, think about how am I actually going to do this? You're not going to do it wrong, because what I often say is you don't learn backwards, you don't unlearn things, right? You're not gonna if you buy a textbook in French and the textbook sucks, or if you go to an evening class and turns out the evening class isn't your thing, it don't matter. Like if you just learned a little bit and it went too slow, then you know what doesn't work for you, which is 1 point, and you've definitely learned a little bit of French, even if it's just pronunciation, even if it's what feels very small to you, still okay, because you're not going to have to learn that again when you continue. So you don't learn backwards. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's all fine.
Progress, yeah. It's
as
all
long as it
progress.
makes you happy.
Exactly, yeah. But I think that's a very good lesson to just point out is that if you have no experience learning a language by yourself, it is a bit of a difficult task because you don't have any ideas. Hopefully, you've listened to lots of these episodes and over on the Fluent Show as well, where we discuss this in great detail, so you have some inspiration. And I know one of my big focuses on each episode is to get the method out of the interviewee. So the person who's coming on here and, they've learned 10, 50 languages, who knows. And I always try to dive down into what did you actually do? So if you don't exactly know how you're going to learn a language, I suggest you go back and listen to some of the older Actual Fluency or Fluent Show episodes where it's very much detailed, and then try some of it. You just because Richard Simcott learned 50 languages using his method doesn't mean that it will work for you. Like, we're all different. Some people like books, some people like YouTube videos, some people like podcasts. And I always say that the best methods, the most effective methods, are the ones that you can keep doing over and over. So the ones that interest you and makes you tick, because it doesn't matter that I find something really effective if when you do it, you find it boring after 2 minutes. That's just obvious. So the last thing, I guess, we have to just end the New Year's resolutions here. I would say an open question for you, Kerstin. Do you think that a lot of people who make language-related New Year's resolutions, who aren't in this, let's say, polyglot group or language learning community where you listen to podcasts or you read blog posts and maybe you've learned a few languages before, people outside that group, when they say something like, I want to learn French, do you think they really want to learn it that deep down? Do you think they have a strong desire to do that? Or do you think it's just like it would be nice this year to learn French and it's just to say something?
Well, first of all, that's not an open question because you phrased it like a yes and no question. So I'm going to open this
up.
Sorry,
open it up for me.
There's a really interesting... The terminology you just used, I think, is really interesting, and something that it helps to differentiate between inside of us could be to know the difference between a desire and an intention. And intentions are a little bit more action focused to me, whereas desires are really there's wishes.
Yeah.
There's really, you don't necessarily need to do something about them instantly, whereas the intention is when you say, no, I want to do something about this.
Yeah. And do you think most people set New Year's wishes instead of New Year's intentions or resolutions?
Well, even if that is the case, I still see a value in them reminding themselves that this is an educational...
For sure.
Because, so there's something my husband did yesterday where he said, because he's a programmer and he likes he likes computers, and he was watching, I don't know, some man on YouTube fix old computers because that's entertaining to some, but he mentioned, just sort of on the side, I should get back into soldering or something. And I was like, what the what? You can solder. He's never soldered in the time we've been together. And I'd rather he didn't start tomorrow in the kitchen. But but there was something, there was this thing that he said, and I just sort of, in my head, this whole thing kicked off where I thought, oh man, wouldn't it be cool to be able to do woodworking? Wouldn't it be cool to be... And then this morning I'm in my front room and I'm thinking, oh man, this would this front room would be so much better if I had a window seat. Wouldn't it be cool to know how to build a window seat? I should look into courses at the adult college on like how to do woodworking. Da, 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 da. And that that's not an intention,
right?
You know, I mean, but it would be really cool, and I know it would greatly enrich my life.
Yeah.
And maybe in the future I'll do something about it. So I feel like if a desire sits with you long enough, it can become an intention, and then it can become action.
It can grow, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't want to like diss the desire.
No, not at all.
As such. But you do make a very important point, because I don't think necessarily. I think you and I probably get it more than other people, or people who don't work with languages, because what happens is you go somewhere, people in small talk ask you what you do, you say something about how you're a language coach, and they say, oh, I want to learn Italian.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Go, oh wow, what do you do? And then you end up with this discussion where they just really, it's a desire, like, Italian would be nice, and that's the same way I say, oh, woodworking would be awesome, soldering, yay. I
have zero patience with people anymore. Maybe it's like a work disability that I've acquired, but it's like when
it's an occupational hazard.
Occupational hazard, yeah. When you say you work with languages, they're like, oh yeah, I really want to learn this language. I'm like, okay, just do it then.
Yeah, or
apps
is brilliant. Listen to my podcast.
I don't even like put it in I don't wrap it up in any way anymore. I'm just like, here's where you go. Do a lesson a day, you'll be fine. And they're like, yeah, but I'm like, okay, whatever. What are you doing in the weekend? Just end the conversation right there, because it's not serious. And I don't want to diss the people who like put these grandiose like wishes out, because it can be a good starting point, as you say. What I want to do is the people who are listening to this, I think most of them are quite serious. They're aware of what it takes to learn a language, and they probably set way better goals and New Year's resolutions than the average person for languages. But I just want to make sure that people are aware of the difference, and make sure they don't use these wishes as some kind of guiding light, because there's not much to guide you in the idea of, I want to learn French this year. There's just not much there. So that's all I want to do, and I think that we can't, like, I had this talk with Benny as well, because I don't know, I used to be younger and more I guess I was more, what's the word, naive maybe. So I was asking Benny in episode 50,
a bit blue-eyed,
I was asking Benny, like, how can we get more people to learn languages? And Benny was like, and this surprised me actually, considering he's one of the biggest language motivators in the world, I think. But he just said, you can't motivate the people who don't want to be motivated. And I'm like, whoa, that's so true. Like, of course, the more people want to learn languages, I'm all for it. But if some people are not interested, I don't want to like drag them into a French class, So that's also important to take into account. We can't save everyone. We can't force this upon everyone, because they're just not interested. And that's totally fine as well.
I 100% agree. You can't. Motivation comes from the inside. It always does, and your situation can make you feel that can affect what's inside of you. So if you like, I know some people that I'm married to who but and my husband says, when I'm in Germany, I want to learn all of the German, or when I'm about to learn German, I notice a big activity rise in the weeks before we're about to go to Germany,
right,
in his study activity. Whereas for me, obviously, there seems to be so much reward in the process that I just do it. I just do it. So my Welsh is better now than his German, probably. Even though I've been doing it for a shorter time, or I started a shorter period ago, which isn't the same as, because you don't, studying something for 5 years could still mean you've only done 2 hours a year.
Yeah.
But so, but that's because I enjoy the process. I am so gratified. I am so excited about knowing another language of the United Kingdom. And now, Chinese has always intimidated me, and I'm really excited about how it's slightly less scary, and I can now identify like 3 characters and stuff, and there's going to be more and there's going to be more, and I can say something. So, I find the whole process so intrinsically rewarding that I don't need as much push from the outside. So I found that the best, or perhaps best, you don't always necessarily have the attention and patience for it, but one of the best replies to this, I want to learn French, is to ask them why. And then see if the person can connect with something internal to them.
Yeah, but even then it can be a struggle because people have these deep-rooted beliefs that it's not possible. Or they think that it's so close to impossible that it's not worth doing. And that's one of the big things that we can fight as a language community, is that we can try and dispel some of these myths, because it's not impossible, and you don't need to learn a lot to get huge benefit. Like, I had a work colleague wanted to learn Arabic for her religion, to read the Quran originals, or in other languages. I'm not really familiar with what language is the original, but just she wanted to do it, and so that's a big personal reason to do it.
Oh, the Quran is really interesting translation-wise, because it's considered only the Quran in the original language.
That's a big topic.
So fascinating.
That is very interesting as well. But I would say that's a good personal reason and a strong drive if you're religious. But
next podcast.
Next podcast, yeah. No, that probably won't happen. But I thought that was a very interesting drive. But she was just not. She wasn't really seeing it. She didn't believe in herself, even though I was telling her, well, it's just easy. You just do this and this every day. Just one lesson a day, 1 page a day, whatever, and then in a year you'll be quite good. I didn't say you'd be fluent or anything, but I just said you would have achieved a lot more than you imagined. And there was just like, you could just tell, even with that strong desire, there was just no belief in that was actually possible. So that's the one thing you're always going to be up against. If you don't believe it's possible, you're never going to do anything. But I guess that's a big underline for this whole goals discussion, and I see that we've also taken up a lot of time, so I want to round this off by saying, well, thank you for that, first of all. It was good debate discussion on goal setting. We're clearly very different when it comes to goal setting, so that's a good contrast.
I've had to learn from experience what doesn't work, so I'm more structured now than I thought I would be at the start.
Right. Well, that's great. And then just as a quick finisher here of the episode, just wanted to, since it is the first episode of 2019, if you're listening to this after 2019, I recommend you turning it off now. But we got some events coming up. Are you going to be traveling at all this year? Any of the language polyglot events you're going to go to?
Yeah, oh my God, so much this year.
Oh yeah, there's so much to choose from.
The event landscape is just getting stronger, and it's all, things are growing. So what's happening in January, the only one where I've really booked my travel, is I'm going to LingoFringo, and I know you've had Maureen Millwood on the show, who has mentioned it already. So LingoFringo is happening on the last Saturday in January, on the 26th of January in Edinburgh. And that's exciting because we've not been to Edinburgh before. And Chris, I'm going to be teaching a Welsh workshop.
Fantastic. Well, they say the best way to learn is to teach. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, you will come out from this workshop at least being able to pronounce. Maybe I'll just teach how to pronounce that really long, the really long place. And I can't remember the whole thing, but I can pronounce it now. But right. No, I'll teach you some very, very basic Welsh and tell you where to start with Welsh, because it's a very Celtic. The event has a Celtic slang because it's in Edinburgh. So if you've got Celtic roots, or you've got Celtic interests, or you've got any language learning interests, come along. And I'll also give a talk about methodology. Lindsay Williams is coming. Adram O'Brien, whose name I can't pronounce because it's written in Gaelic, is coming. It's gonna be fantastic. Simon Hager's coming. Yeah. So the creme de la creme and me.
Come on.
LingoFringo is happening on the 26th. Then there is Women in Language, which people don't have to leave their house for. That's taking place this year from the 7th to the 10th of March. Mm-hmm. Women in Language is an online event. It's just an online an online language conference that we're very, very excited about. And I co-organized that, so it's good.
It's organized at least.
And it's because it's online as well, there's no big travel costs associated with it. It's not very prohibitive. We gave 10% to charity last year. We're planning to do it again this year. So it's, you're doing a cool thing. So, and it's not, I have to say this very often because it's, I guess, I just want to be clear. Women in Language has only female speakers, but has attendees of all genders and from the whole gender spectrum. So don't feel put off by it. If you don't happen to be female, please come along. You are more than welcome and you won't be alone. And then we've got what's coming up. We've got the Polyglot Gathering.
The gathering
in
the
May
last
in
one
Bratislava.
the last one in Bratislava apparently. Where do you think they're gonna go next year?
Haven't a clue. There's talk of Poland. It depends on who organizes it, right?
Yeah.
Minded going back to Berlin for a little while.
No, that's not a bad city. I haven't been there in a while, but you're going there in March anyway, aren't you?
In March?
Yeah.
That there's the Language Influencer Summit.
Yes. Well,
Yes.
we have to put that out there as well. It's Ollie and Jan's new idea.
Yes, that's right. So if you're interested in, I don't know, influencing in
Well,
languages.
no, it's more about like I guess networking in the language industry. So if you have a product or you have a blog or a podcast, YouTube channel, whatever you have that you want to grow and maybe want to find more opportunities to maybe make a living out of languages, then you can definitely come to this event, which has a lot of people who have experience in marketing. You have some of the biggest companies as well coming out for you to network with. Like you can speak to and see what's up there. So obviously not a lot of listeners are gonna be interested in this, but I thought it was interesting just to mention it as well because it's a completely new thing, and again it's part of a movement I think to make language learning bigger, basically make it a bit more like finance or all these fitness conferences everywhere and all these other conferences, tech and media and gaming and all this, where language learning has always been a little bit, I think, and still probably is, quite niche. It's quite a obscure hobby to have, and hopefully with all these events that you mentioned, it's going to be even bigger. But yeah, just want to throw that in there. Language Influencer Summit. I'm very excited about that. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
The gathering in May, June in Bratislava. I kind of like the location. I think it's okay. It's the city itself. Once you've seen it, I think you've seen it. But the venue is nice. A very big university venue there. So there's lots of room. Whereas the Berlin one was kind of cramped at the end.
That's true. Yeah. And because it's grown a lot. We've got over 500 language lovers coming now, which is one of the greatest things about the Polyglot Gathering. So there is also, looking further ahead, we've got LangFest and we have the Polyglot Conference, which is in Japan this year. So we've got Canada and Japan, a truly global, and this is just, I think we're still just scratching the surface.
Yeah,
we are hoping to make Women in Language into a real life event at some point.
Don't say that. It is a real life event.
True.
A physical event.
A physical event where you can, where we can all be in a room as each other. Oh, and having said that, I have to mention, I am hosting 3 language retreats this year as well. So that's currently what's on the calendar. So if you're interested in learning French or you're interested in learning German and want an immersion vacation, really, that's what these retreats are all about. I've hosted 2 now, and I can't tell you how much they do for the people who are coming. So those are taking place in the middle of June. We're doing the Loire Valley, La Vallée de Loire,
nice.
en France, and then we're going out to Hamburg. So we're doing Hamburg as well. And at the end of the year, there is going to, if you're a long-term planner or you want a long-term ambition, or you're taking German Uncovered,
or if you're listening to this in September, maybe.
Damn straight. Then I am about to invite you to the I call it the Wein and Weihnachten retreat, Wine and Christmas, which is in Trier in Germany. We had a wonderful time this year, and that location is worth visiting again. It's Germany's oldest city, remarkable. Lots and lots of remarkable things, and the wine is out of this world.
Yeah, and also just the idea of being completely immersed in a group that's a small group that's only interested in learning or using that language, German. I think it's one of the best ways you can grow your language from, let's say, starting to be conversational and actually having full-on conversations with people who are like kindred spirits in a way on the same journey. So that's highly recommended. Are you gonna go to Japan?
I'm sort of looking at the moment. It's weird, isn't it? Flights have changed. Flight prices have changed. They're coming down. I'm part of this. It's called Jack's Flight Club.
Oh yeah, I get those. Yeah.
Yeah, you get little flight alerts, and I've noticed that the prices have come down a lot. The only international trip I've planned this year at the moment, besides the language retreats, France, Germany, come along, is I'm going to Denver to a mastermind that I'm hosting together with my other mastermind members. So it's a private group that we have been running for years and years and years, and every 2 or 3 years we do a retreat. So
Colorado.
Denver, Colorado. The flights were cheap. Strangely. It's about twice the price of going to Edinburgh, which it's not twice.
Wow, that is cheap. Yeah.
It was a good. It just sort of came up, and I said, well, do you know what, guys? And one of my friends from the mastermind has just moved there. I was like, how about we do Denver? And they were all keen, so we're doing that. A
lot of travel this year for you.
I'd quite like already, isn't it? And I'm hoping I've got a few more events and ideas up my sleeve, so it's difficult to commit at the moment. I think Bratislava is probably a given just because it is so fun.
It's easy to get to relatively. The flights are pretty cheap as well. You can just fly to Vienna or Budapest and just take the bus.
Hot as hell though every year.
Yeah, that is one thing I will say. You need to bring your shorts and drink lots of water, for sure. But I think what is really nice now is that we have events across the world. So if you're in America or Canada, Mexico, or any of the countries in the Americas, then you can get to LangFest relatively easily. I'm sure it's probably quite expensive to fly from like Colombia to Canada, but if you're in the US, I would imagine it would be quite doable because every city has a flight to New York, and it's only I think it's an 8 or 10 hour drive there. You can get the train, or you can even get regional flights as well for probably not much money. And if you're in Europe, you got Bratislava. Anyone in Europe can get to Bratislava within a few hours. You've got Japan for people in Asia. And I don't know if I'll get there. It's quite far. It takes quite a lot of planning, and like the prices as well are quite high. So you really need a good deal from Jack to make it happen. But if all those things line up, which they may as well, you're never sure. Then why not? I've never been to Asia before, so that would also be a good excuse. I feel like for all the conferences I've done abroad, especially in the countries that I would never have visited. Like I did the Polyglot workshops in Budapest. I'd never even considered Hungary before. What's Hungary? If you don't know anything about the country, you've never been there, why would you go there, if you don't know anything? So when I went to the workshops, I was like, wow, this is a really nice place and people are really nice. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration as well. They don't like, it's hard to fit in there, but they're definitely very hospitable. And I stayed in Budapest for 18 months, even though I was only supposed to be there a week. And I went to Bratislava for the gathering, first time in Slovakia. All these things I would not have done probably. So I really recommend people listening to this to go to these events whenever you can. And of course, for most people, it's unrealistic to be able to go to both Canada and Japan. But maybe you can find two of them, a combination that you can go to. And it's just such a safe environment, I feel like, because there's so many friendly people, there's so many people who have the same interests as you in a foreign country, so you're not like lost. I know some people love the whole idea of solo traveling, backpacking the world. For me, it's I don't like that at all. It's very scary for me to just randomly go to some place. So the idea of having the conference as like a meeting point or some kind of central a pivotal point of the trip is for me great, because then I can go explore the other days, or I'll stay a week longer. I'll come the day before or whatever, and try to take part in some of the trips at the event. And for me, that's just a great way to see the world, great way to make new friends. And Japan, it's going to be something different. You know, people tell me it's crazy there if you're if you're from Europe. So can't wait to see what that brings if I'm able to go.
Yeah, and then I'm also planning the National Eisteddfod, which is the Welsh National Festival, and that's in North Wales this year. It's not very exciting for anybody who isn't me, but something I do there is volunteer. So I just wanted to as well make you aware, you know, if you find the cost of an event prohibitive, or you really want to practice your language, volunteering at an event in the country is terrifying, but also one of the coolest things you can do, and I can't recommend it enough. And you're learning, if nothing else, you're going to come out having learned sentences like, what did I learn last year? Defnyddio drws, which is use the other door, please. Or Esteda in a sedi wedi cadw. Please sit in the reserved seats.
Well, very useful.
If nothing else, you're coming out with that. So I'm again hoping to do that as well. And so I do plan my events around my languages. In that sense, Canada's more likely than Japan, because a week in French-speaking environment is helpful for me.
Oh, yeah, that's nice as well. And it's such a lovely place, Montreal. What a lovely city. And it's cheap as well. Like I think it's about £200 cheaper for me to go to Japan than Montreal than Japan. Even from Manchester, which is interesting. £450 with, well, that's just for now. I don't know if it goes up for it's probably because it's in summer. It'll probably be a little bit more, but still, you know, if you can fly with KLM or something via Amsterdam, Air France via Paris, it's very doable. So and I just love it there. North America for me I would settle down there if I could, but visa rules and everything is a bit tricky. But anyway, enough rambling. Kerstin, it's been a pleasure. I can't believe that it's been 3+ years since you were on the show last.
I can't believe it's been 3+ years that we've been doing this.
Well, yeah, but that's what I said after 1 year, to be honest. So I don't know.
That's right.
How am I still doing this? But no, it's been a great pleasure to have you back, and I hope it won't take 3 years next time. And I'll put all the links in the description, so if people are interested in the toolkit, the language habit toolkit, or the retreats, or the Women in Language conference,
or the Fluent Show,
all of the links will be in the description. And I hope that people have a great 2019. I know for sure I will have. And judging by your plans and what you told me, sounds like you're going to have an amazing 2019 as well.
God, I feel overwhelmed saying them all out loud like that.
That's where planning comes into play.
That's right. So, actual fluency listeners, thank you so much for having me, for giving me the time to listen. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. Come on over to the Fluent Show sometime. And Chris, thank you so much for having me. I've had a really good time.
No worries. It's been great fun. I could do this all day. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. I really appreciate having you here today. Just before you leave, I just want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is italki. Italki is a tutoring platform where you can find affordable tutors for every language in the world, pretty much. So get started today and get a free $10 credit when you book your first lesson. If you go to actualfluency.com/italki, and that's spelled